A lot of times technical skills can be taught, but that mindset is much harder to develop. Are you coachable? Are you able to take feedback without becoming defensive? Like, how strong is your communication? Can you explain things clearly? If priorities change, can you pivot? Are you flexible?
This is part one of Food Grad's three-part HR mini-series, bringing you inside the hiring process with support from DeLacy Executive Recruitment. In this episode, I sat down with Nicolas Pretorius, who leads talent acquisition at Highliner Foods.
What I'm looking for is more so like how they clearly translate what they've done into skills and outcomes. That can be from projects, volunteer work, sports, retail jobs, you name it. I mean, if I'm able to see results, improvements, real responsibilities, that candidate moves up that list really quickly.
We talk about what hiring managers actually look for, how to approach resumes and interviews, and realistic ways that students can build experience and momentum as they start their careers. This is a great episode, so let's get into it.
So I lead talent acquisition for Highliner Foods. We are a leading North American processor and marketer of frozen added value frozen seafood. The company sells products to the North American market, specifically for food retailers. We also sell into food distributors. We have production facilities throughout the US and Canada, as well as offices, and then a few outfits around the globe. My team specifically, we hire across the spectrum from our plant operations to various corporate positions. And a typical week for me would be a mix of strategy and execution. I usually partner with leaders to help them understand workforce needs, looking at hiring trends, reviewing tough to fill roles, helping the business thinking long term about talent planning. And I can also just be working on some cross-functional HR projects or just talent acquisition management, like spending time on refining our talent process, because in manufacturing, hiring delays impact production, which impacts revenue. So recruitment isn't just an HR activity, it is by all means an operational impact. And lastly, I would say I do still review resumes, I do interviews. I like staying close to the action. That's where you really see what's going right and going wrong and what's happening in the market. So yeah, that's roughly high level overview.
So it's not just hiring only, there's actually more like long-term planning and those types of
Oh yeah.
things. Okay.
Oh yeah.
If you mind me asking, how far out do you plan for strategy in terms of planning? Is it like 1 year, 10 years, 5 years?
Well, that's a good question. So it is a mixture. Like, there's only so much you can plan long term because it all depends on like the needs of the business. But on the flip side, you want to ensure, because I would say recruitment is just one function or one thing we do in talent acquisition. So when I joined Highliner, I quickly saw what the state of recruitment was, how we needed to kind of pivot to make sure this is a sustainable process, and a few things like came up, like we needed a pretty robust talent acquisition strategy, and we kind of mapped out a 3-year strategy. And there was a few things we needed to focus on, like build out our employer brand, build out our early talent pipelines, reduce cost per hire, multiple different things, and to kind of hit those impact points, we needed to develop a few programs to kind of support. One of them is our co-op program, actually. So we had a 3-year plan of how we want to kind of grow and scale our talent function, to be more strategic, more aligned to business outcomes. But on the flip side, on just regular recruitment, we try and map that out 12 months in advance. Like, we know this time of the year we'll be focusing on co-ops, this time of the year we'll be focusing on marketing roles or whatever that might be, or we'll have hiring events for our production facilities these times of the year. So you plan, and then reality comes through, like, oh, like this happened, or we're installing this new machine at this facility and we need these skills on site. So a lot of pivoting in between, but so definitely some planning, sometimes a bit more predictable than other times, but you have to pivot a lot.
It's very dynamic and it's always ever changing to market trends, what's popular, what's, as you said, with the facilities. And would you be able to expand a little bit more on where you work in terms of, like, is it a large scale company? Do you have multiple facilities? Is it just one? Like, I know that a small facility with one family owned business looks very different than maybe one with like 5 across the country, or that. Just paint a picture for us if you could.
No, for sure. So we have one production facility in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, one in Newport News, Virginia, and then Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And essentially, we have it then smaller outfits over the globe, which is usually just buying the raw material, and that gets shipped to one of these three facilities where it gets processed, value added, then sold to the North American market. And then we have offices as well. We have an office in Halifax, office in Mississauga, and an office in Portsmouth for more of the, I guess, the supporting corporate roles or the commercial roles. So I would say we're a medium-sized company, not super big, not super small, and that's how I like it, to be honest. We're big enough that there's some infrastructure; it's not total chaos, but we're small enough that your scope is fairly large. You're gonna get a taste of a bit of everything.
So it's a sounds like a coast to coast company, like all
Oh
over the
yeah,
place.
oh yeah.
Wow. And then moving back to you in terms of just HR and how you got into it, is this something that you had wanted to do out of school? Was it something that it naturally came out? I heard one of the last guests on the series, they actually started as an engineer and then they got into HR through health and safety. So I was just curious a little bit about your path into this field.
That's a good question because I would say if you ask anybody in recruitment, nobody ever dreamt of going into recruitment. Like you just kind of fall into it. Now, for me, I guess the journey was a bit longer. So in 20, I guess I'm dating myself here, but in 2012, December, I graduated university in South Africa. And then January of 2013, I got off the plane, fresh immigrant, no experience, like no working experience in my field, no Canadian experience. And at the time, internships were unpaid. And also being an immigrant, fresh, no support network. So I needed to pay bills from day one. I needed to any job. So I started working retail, part-time, full-time management at Sobeys, and then through that, networked, leveraged those relationships, and then later in 2016, I want to say, I kind of got my break, went into the corporate side within HR, and then did multiple things in HR. I did like learning and development, relocation and recognition, and then through a conversation with the talent acquisition director at Sobeys at the time, because we were relocating a VP from the US and we were talking immigration. And he's like, "Oh, you should really become a recruiter." I was like, "No, I don't want to become a recruiter like that." My experience with recruiters were really bad. Eventually, back and forth, and I kind of joined, and I really enjoyed it because you get to meet so many different people. You you see the best of I guess the motivated individuals versus the other side of HR. Is a lot of times you're dealing with employee relationship issues. There's all the negativity of it. And for me, I have a business degree or a business background, so I kind of understand the whole picture. And then for me to kind of see, well, this skill set will fit in there, but not just that department, but the overall. So I enjoy it quite a lot. And I honestly thought talent acquisition would be like a 2 year stint, and then I move on to something else. And eventually I will. But now I still enjoy it quite a bit. So yeah, that's kind of how I fell into it.
I love that. I love the zigs and the zags, and it goes to show, now you're in the food and beverage industry. You kind of started through the retail side, and it gives there's so many different opportunities, and maybe it's something you didn't discover that you liked early on because you just never experienced it, but there is an opportunity to do it later on.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's always the opportunities that I was against that I enjoyed the most because I feel too many people have these like blinders on like, oh, I want to become VP of this or I want to do that, and then all the other opportunities come up and they never take them. Like I remember like when I worked in the store, like in a Sobe store, like they wanted me to become a deli manager. Like, no way, I don't want to do that. Like I want to go into what I studied for. And then I think the fourth or fifth time they asked me, I was like, fine, I'll do it. And that experience really helped. I always tell candidates like, there's no such thing as wasted experience. You learn things as long as you learn stuff from it and take something from it. You can apply it onwards elsewhere. And eventually, when I did get my corporate break, it was because of my retail experience, because I understood the front line, I understood the shift work, I understood the people, and that was my differentiating asset or experiential asset that I then leveraged. Until this day, like I find all those other random pockets of experience I have that I use now just makes my current skill set more wholesome.
Wow. Well, I think that's the perfect segue to start talking about more applicable advice to students. Obviously, with your story, it goes to show that you can make any experience something that's resume worthy as long as you know how to package it and bring it up
Oh
and
yeah.
try new experiences. So I think that's like a great opportunity. I know you talked a little bit earlier about it, but let's go back to like co-op opportunities that your company has or new graduates. Tell us a little bit more about like the types of co-op programs you have, how you hire new hires, what opportunities are there for them?
we've always had students to some extent, but historically it was fairly decentralized. I mean, each team brought in their own student and then managed it their own way. And then in 2023, we decided to be way more intentional about it, and we built a centralized student program called Casting Nets to the Future. And it was partly so going back to that, I guess, planning and strategy. This program is partly tied to that 3-year strategy, but we had 3 clear goals in mind. We wanted to build early talent pipelines and strengthen our employer brand. We also wanted to offer opportunities to students so they can learn and contribute to meaningful work, and also to bring in fresh perspectives to our company so that our company can grow. And I mean, our student program is not a shadow somebody for the summer experience. Students are embedded directly into operations, supply chains, QA, or other finance departments. They're giving meaningful work, meaningful projects that contributes to business outcomes. It's not just administrative tasks. We're not just putting them in a filing room. And I mean, there's many things that makes this program great, but I would say there's probably like 3 things that really stand out. Or we have a very comprehensive onboarding experience for all new hires, not just students. So it features live training sessions, fundamental seafood training, pretty structured onboarding, like the 30, 60, 90 days onboarding plan to help support early success. The student program also has a built-in peer network with multiple touch points throughout the co-op term, and also dedicated professional development sessions. So some of these workshops might include project management, resume, I guess how to build, I guess, an effective resumes, interviews, best practices, all designed to upskill the students while they're with us. And then furthermore, just general networking opportunities, so they're able to connect and learn from leaders across the business. We also have opportunities for them to connect with our executives. Like I remember, I did the math, and I mean, Canada has roughly what 45 million people, give or take, and only about 50,000 individuals are at that executive level. So I was getting exposure to the executives is like a 0.01%. So we give them that exposure to our executives where they have a session, and they're able to ask candid questions directly to these leaders, get some like inside advice on how to understand long-term career progression, what that might look like. On the flip side of this structured student program, we also look at the hiring managers. We provide them with training how to assess, mentor, and develop early talent. I mean, that support structure is crucial for a student program because I would say a program is only as strong as the leaders guiding it. So the program is really meant to be, I guess, provide exposure to students, provide some structure, some community. And I would say I'm fairly proud about this program. Like we got nominated by Dalhousie University last year, so 2025, for Best Student Program. And then recently now in 2026, we received recognition / award from Canadian Top Employer, Canada's Top Employer for Young People, so Top 100. As largely because of the structure and intentionality behind this initiative. So for me, that really validates the success of this program.
Well, I'm not surprised that you've won awards on it. Sounding from what you've just said, like that is such a wonderful opportunity, because I know when you're in your school programs, you don't get a lot of opportunities, I feel like, to meet with the people in the businesses, especially in maybe food science programs. You might meet with a research and development if you're in a food science or a science one, but not the business, or unless you're in a business program, you kind of get stuck with it. So to have that opportunity to see where you could potentially grow in the company, but then the skills and the resume and hearing directly from the source, what are you looking for? That sounds like an amazing opportunity.
Oh yeah, and it's so for us, like we hire roughly 15 students per summer, across locations, across departments, whatnot, but because it's like we hire them as a cohort, they come together. They'll be planted in their specific department, but get together as students so they can network amongst themselves as well. And funny you should say that, because you get exposure to other parts of the business. And it's funny you should mention like seeing other things, because a lot of times our food scientists, they end up in sales after a few years, because they go with our sales teams on site and show the operators like how to prepare the food and stuff, and they like that so much, and because they are they know the product so well, they do really well in the sales role. So from food science to sales.
Wow. And it goes to show people skills are so important with that too. And, you can pave your path. If you want to stay with the technical sale, you could go to the technical portion of it, because you need to know what you're buying or what you're selling to, and that. So it's great to know that there's exposure and you can, again, move around within a company.
Oh yeah, most definitely, yeah.
And I wanted to now transition, let's start talking about hiring. I know that's what a lot of the students probably listening want to hear about is some recommendations. And I guess we'll start with the resume aspect of it. And for you, when you're looking at resumes for entry level positions, what are some of the things that stand out to you in a good candidate on a resume?
Mm, so I would say for entry level candidates, um, impact and evidence. I mean, students don't have 10 years of experience, and nor do I expect them to have 10 years of experience. What I'm looking for is more so like how they clearly translate what they've done into skills and outcomes. And I mean, that can be from projects, volunteer work, sports, retail jobs, you name it. I mean, if I'm able to see results, improvements, real responsibilities, that candidate moves up that list really quickly. And it can be something as simple as like reduce processing times by 12% on a school project, work night shifts while maintaining a full course load. Because what that tells me is reliability, time management, performance. A lot of times in manufacturing, like we don't hire for perfection, we hire for dependability. So instead of listing responsibilities or I mean like adjectives that says like I'm hardworking or like rather show me the impact. Like what's the so what? Like did you lead something? Did you improve something? Did you solve something? That's really what matters. And apart from the resume, and I would say the cover letter is very controversial. But I mean like I do the like take the extra step, put together a thoughtful cover letter. It really shows a bit of effort, personality maybe, but also it shows that you actually researched the company, you put a lot of effort into it, and then really that effort stands out in a very competitive market. Yeah.
So it sounds as though it's important for, maybe you're not looking right now for a job, or maybe you're just doing a volunteer project, but trying to create projects for yourself that you can show off on a resume that's not necessarily, like, I guess thinking about soccer club, it could be like starting a timetable, or I don't know soccer, but find something that you can create a project that you can show off.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like you creating a project, like it's just using any experience. Like in a resume itself, like you can have different formats of resumes. I mean, the traditional one is like you list your job with responsibilities, but you can also have like skill buckets. Like let's say you're applying to, I don't know, like a finance job or something, and you haven't worked in like an FP&A setting where you take care of budgeting. You can then perhaps have skill buckets like budgeting, forecasting, and then pool experiences from different areas, like either from volunteer work or group project. Because I guess the student could work on a community funded program or association or a project at school where there's some forecasting, some budgeting, so you kind of lump all those different experiences together under one skill. So when they look at it, it's like, oh, we're looking for somebody that has budgeting and forecasting experience. This individual hasn't formally worked in a such a position, but able to like, collect all those experiences and list them under one bucket.
Okay, I've never actually heard it. So is skill bucket like a type of resume? Because like I know there's chronological, there's maybe skill bucket is the other one. So it's just like
I don't quote me on the actual term, but like
okay,
it's like a different format where you list your skills
okay,
rather than the job title. So you can say like, oh, for example, let's say I want to go into project management. I've never worked in project management, but I manage project every single day. So I was like, oh yeah, like project management, then list different projects,
oh,
how I
okay,
kind of manage them, and if it's forecasting, once again, I'm not in a financial role where I do
yeah.
annual forecast, but I then forecast like our planning, like roughly when in the year, so it kind of translate them
Hmm.
into and kind of connecting the dots with the other people. And I remember when it really became clear to me is when I worked at Sobeys, we were implementing a new AI in recruitment, and essentially what it did was it looked at you upload your resume, it looks at your experience, but it doesn't do a keyword search. It looks at the content
Hmm.
essentially, or the context rather. And to test it, they said, "Oh, go apply at this different company, upload your resume, and see what job it suggests to you." Similar to what LinkedIn does now. And I remember I uploaded my resume, and it said finance manager. I was like, "I've never worked a day in my life in finance. I have a BCom degree, but never worked in finance." And then I looked at why it said that, and it was all transferable skills like delegate, project management, like so similar skills, different context. Um, so very important to keep that in mind. Like you're more qualified than you think at times.
Interesting. And then one thing that you had added, you mentioned a little bit earlier, was for if someone was like working part-time while they were managing their studies, would that, like, would you put that in a skill bucket, or would that be something that you could put like in a summary phrase? Like, how would you look for that?
That's a good question. Probably, once again, depending on how you put your resume together, like I've tried different things. Like at one time, I think if I had to put my resume now together, I'll have like little overview of the job, like this scope, like this is what my scope looking after talent acquisition for North America across salaried and supply chain roles, blah 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 blah, and then list a few of my accomplishments. So probably like in an overview, I'll mention like, hey, I'm doing this in adjacent to this, this, and this, just to kind of showcase time management, or call it out more like time management. Like I'm doing
Okay.
this and this. Um, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. And then I guess moving on a little bit, we've talked about those transferable skills. Is there a need to, I would hope so, but is there a need to put technical skills as well? Like if you're getting hired for like a QA position, like what, I guess, okay, stepping it back with the question is like, what technical skills do you find are most missing from career applicants? And is it important to also list technical skills?
Yes and no.
Okay.
And what I mean by that, I mean certain jobs require like foundational technical skills, but it really does depend on the actual role or department you're applying to. One thing I would say for early career roles, like technical skills are obviously important, but in many cases it's really the soft skills and the mindset that's missing. Now, like I said, like some of those skills are foundational, but beyond the baseline, what really separates is like how you think, how you operate. I mean, a lot of times technical skills can be taught, but that mindset is much harder to develop. Like, are you coachable? Um, are you able to take feedback without becoming defensive? Like, how strong is your communication? Can you explain things clearly? If priorities change, can you pivot? Are you flexible? And I must say a thing that I'm seeing, I guess, trending now more so is the lack of critical thinking, especially with the rise of AI that can generate answers quickly. The differentiator really becomes then like, can you is not having access to information anymore, but it is that judgment. Can you analyze the situation? Can you weigh the trade-offs? All those different pieces. And I would say the other thing is I kind of classify or as ownership is big for me. Like, do you take initiative? Like, when you have a problem, do you just go and say, "Oh, I have this problem," or do you try and come with a solution? Like, I'm not looking for a perfect solve, but like it shows that you're trying. Is there a follow through? Do you take responsibility when things go wrong? So really, it is that ownership, communication, taking the initiative, critical thinking, coachability. That's massive. Because I would say technical skills get you in the door at times, but it really is the mindset that determines how far you go. So I would say probably that teachable, coachable piece. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess that's a good transition to start talking about interview because I feel like that's something that you kind of more show when, as you said, get your foot in the door, and then you're at the interview stage. So I guess speaking on to the critical thinking, like it's hard to say like I am a critical thinker. Like how would you demonstrate that in a resume? Sorry, how would you demonstrate that in like an interview?
No, that's a good question, and it's so we always look at past behavior because past behavior is a good predictor of future performance. So if you're able to kind of share an example of how of a time where X and Y happened, like I guess the whole STAR method, like what situation, task, action, result, gonna show like, hey, this is what happened, this is what I kind of thought, and this is the action I took. And once again, a lot of people think like, oh, I have to have a perfect example where everything went really well. It can be something that went really wrong as well, like, and then show like, oh, that this is what we thought, this is what the hypothesis was, whatever. This was the end result, and this is what we learned. So you actually, once again, you thought about it. So I would say just coming with examples and thinking like, whatever you're saying, like, what's the so what behind it? Like, yeah, did you analyze? Did you take something from it? Like, yeah, I'm not sure about.
No,
Kind
it does. And I guess it goes to show the importance of, prepping for the interview, having examples.
of.
Like you have to be able to not speak to what your resume is because you kind of have to prove why you're saying it on your resume because if it's on your resume, it's free game to be asked about. So I guess it goes to show for prepping for an interview, like you definitely have to have your examples ready.
Oh yeah, 100%. I feel like interviewing in itself is a skill, and I always I think in a few different companies now that I worked, I've kind of developed like a workshop that I put hiring managers through to show them like, hey, these are best practices for interviews. And then when we have the debrief, I always try and challenge them like, don't interview the interview. Like there's like some bad interviewees or interview whatever out there. Because interviewing is a skill. It is stressful for the candidates, or rather, once again, go on the evidence. Like, what are they showing? Going on the facts. Like, what are they trying to show us? I mean, but do come prepared. Like I think one of the biggest red flags that I often see in any type of interview is just people that's not doing their research, people that's not being prepared, not showing up like dressed professionally. So preparation is key. I guess there's a quote that says victory, or no, how does it go? Yeah, victory loves preparation.
Yeah, I think that one it's a good one. And in hearing about some of your tips, like you said, to dress well is there's always been a little bit of a confusion for me in terms of knowing what to dress for the type of role. Because I know like when you're doing on a production floor, are you expected to come in like a suit? Like I feel like that's more like a business type thing. Very specific question, but like what type of
Yeah.
outfits do you look for?
No, that's a good question. I would say you can always ask the recruiter, like, hey, how do I dress before going? Because how you want your personality to come out. So like, do you dress flamboyantly if it's a creative job? Do you just come out in a suit? Like, there's a fine line. I would say like you'll never be turned down if you dress well. Doesn't matter what role it is, but you would if you're not dressed properly. Like I remember years ago, there was like a director level interview, and the individual came wearing their running clothes. It was like that's a solid no.
Okay.
And then also in a production facility, like somebody showed up with like I think their swim shorts, like a and like flip flops, and there was also like there's no like once again, be respectful of everybody involved. Like it doesn't have to be like a three-piece suit, but at least a dress shirt or a blouse or whatever that might be. Um, just dress up a bit.
Okay, dress up a little bit more than you think you need to, but don't um, be yourself, but also dress like how you'd want to be presented, essentially, because this is how your first impression is going to be when they see you.
Exactly.
Okay, and then speaking about other prep, because you said like about knowing the company, like, should you know the full like 100-year history of the company? Like to, I know it's important to know about the company, but what are some general things that show that you understand what's going on? What are some of the key things you should know?
I would say for any company that I interview, like knowing like what products they produce, what services they produce, what they're about. I would say that's at the general accepted level. Like knowing, because ultimately what I'm looking for, I guess I always like during a phone screen when I talk to candidates, I always ask like why do you apply to this company? And for some people that's a very dumb question, but for me it really signals like I'm looking for that passion because ultimately if you have some sort of alignment to the company, the purpose, the product, the service, research actually shows that you are way more of a higher performer than people that's let's say a 10 out of 10. Um, so I would say like do your research today, knowing what the products are, what the services are, like some of the basics. Um, like for me, like I would go and create a full dossier, like I'll ask ChatGPT things, like I look at their financials. But once again, I rather over prepare so that I know exactly what I'm getting into. But I would say at a minimum, just know at least their products, their basic story, who's on the board, things like that, just to show that there is interest.
Okay. And I guess as well, it goes to show, like, I would imagine with some of the hires that you have through the co op, like, they are people that you potentially look for that could be long term in the company. Because I know
Oh yeah,
many companies do hire co op and then take them on full time once they graduate.
100%. So our out of the 15 students that we hired last summer, we hired seven of them into various capacities, like
Wow.
contract, part time, and then I guess a bunch of those students only graduate this April, and we hired two or three of them. They already have offers out, already accepted. They will start, I guess, once they graduate.
Wow.
So yeah, no, we do look for long term. I mean, and for any, I would say any hot like position that we hire for, a lot of times the hiring manager will be just be focusing on their department.
Hmm.
But given my role, you're connected with different departments. You kind of see the picture from a bit bigger. So we'll advise them like, hey, this candidate might be really good, but this candidate is maybe like a 7 out of 10. But long term they'll be better because we can move them into that team or to that team, or they can support that team. So there'll be a better Highliner hire versus a that specific department hire.
Wow, like it's already it's so interesting to think that you might be thought of already like steps ahead, and you're just applying for this position, but you're being seen by other people saying, "Oh, they would complement this team, or they would." So like people can see more of you that you don't even realize yet of yourself.
Oh yeah, and it gets tricky though because I would say different companies have different hiring philosophies. I mean, there's companies that if you apply to a job, let's say it's a manager role, they would only hire director level people because they already know they're going to promote that person like within a year. Where other companies, it's way more flat or what it, and then that person might be stuck in that role for 4 years. So they hire, I would say, like let's say they're going into a manager level role, they'll hire a tier below, and they'll hire them into a manager role so that they can then learn and grow until they're at the manager level before they continue on. So it really is depending on the hiring philosophy, the talent management in the back end, and
Wow,
such.
I've never actually heard of that. That's really interesting to know. Huh.
Hmm.
Huh. And I think that actually blends well to like my next question, which also relates to this, is that we always hear this word like culture fit, like find a company that suits your culture, like we're going to hire for this. And I just like to know from your perspective, like what do if you use that term to find the right culture fit, and then I guess if that is the case, like how does a person who's looking to go into a company, like how do you figure out if that company is for you?
That's a good question. Like personally, I'm not a huge fan of the culture fit.
Okay.
Like what fit means for one person means something totally different for somebody else, and if you're not careful, it can become code for hiring people who look and think and
Mm,
act like us, which leads to bias, which leads to groupthink. Well, not leads to group, well, leads to bias and groupthink.
mm-hmm.
So in our organization, we focus less on the culture fit, and we look for, I guess, alignment in values and competencies. Um, Usually, in I would say like a food manufacturing environment, culture often comes down to a few core behaviors like safety first mindset, respecting the process, team orientation, accountability. But it's less about like personality and more how you operate. So at Highliner, we anchor the hiring around those defined competencies like effective communication, collaboration, customer focused innovation, things like that. So our interviews are behavioral and competency based to reduce bias and provide more clarity and alignment ultimately. So that's yeah, what I would say like
Okay.
yeah.
And then I guess for, I know that's from the like your side as the employer, but what about as like a student that's like, or like a new graduate, not quite sure, on paper it might look like this is a good company, but then when you
Yeah.
get to the interview, you want to try to assess that. Do you have any suggestions on questions they can ask or ways that they can kind of suss out if this would be a good fit for them?
Oh yeah, I would say for a candidate trying to assess that culture from the outside, I would say there's a few things they can look for. Like you can go and look at their current employees or their content they put out on LinkedIn and whatnot. But like look at like how the company talks about safety. Like what's the employee tenure like? Is the leadership visible and accessible? For me, that's a big one. And like how does onboarding appear? So during the interview, like if you get an interview, you can ask them like what does the success look like in the first 90 days? And depending on how the company answer, it would if it's very thoughtful and clear, it really shows there's some type of alignment or structure. And if it's more vague, it also tells you something. So instead of asking like, "Do I fit here?" I would say like, look more so like, does my like values and strengths align with how the organization defines success? That really is, I guess, a healthier lens for both sides.
Okay. So it's not, you don't necessarily have to just directly ask, like, what is your culture, but try to figure out other ways that are important to you in how do I want to put this? Figure out ways that there would be sorry, where's my chain of thought going? um,
No, I think
I
I know
don't,
what you mean, but like,
yeah.
it, I would ask like how do you support employees that's struggling? Like when last did like when they did like some type of pulse check survey, did they actually action some of the stuff that the employees brought out? Um, like I mentioned, like the one that's big for me is like how accessible is the leadership? Like are they locked away in some corner office or are they open to I would say lower level people knocking on their door, taking suggestions? Are they humble and down to earth? Things like that. Like, is it like what's the culture about? Like learning and developing. Um, yeah, things like that. So
Okay, like, yeah, I guess you could see like what like seeing with what you have with your co-op students that you have that program for them, and that is a key. That's a good show that they're looking to develop their employees to grow and learn. But that might work maybe for a larger company. I know with smaller ones they do struggle a little bit more, but there are opportunities. Like, how, if I was in this role, how would I be trained to improve on my skills? Like, what continuous improvement do you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly, like what continuous improvement is there, and like you mentioned, like not, I mean, growth does not always like look like climbing the
Mm-hmm.
ladder. It could be a lattice approach where you can either do a lateral move or go for a training session. So asking like, yeah, like what does continuous improvement or employee development look like? Is it like going for a course? Is there maybe some funds that every year you can put towards a diploma or some type of education? Is there a mentorship program? Like, what does that look like? Because development looks different for different people, also different levels. So, to your point, I mean, this core program for us, it really showcased that we do invest in our people. We do have a culture of promoting within and developing people and investing because ultimately the people is the main source of the company. I guess without the people, there is nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's our main asset, so to speak.
And then, as well, just adding a little bit more to the interview thing, I think that we might have missed just talking about general interview questions or just general things. Like, do you have any general interview tips that you would say, like, what questions should you prepare for? I know that we said, okay, you should know about the company, but what other questions are some of the more standard ones that would probably be good to prepare for?
Good question. And I would say the advice I usually give any candidate, not specific, just students, I would say like when you apply for a job, as soon as you apply, copy and save that job description because 2, 3 days later the job is down, you don't have access to it anymore. So that you at least have a list of like this is what I'm applying for, these are the things I need to interview on. I would then take that job description, throw it in an AI like ChatGPT, and ask it to provide you with 10 or 20 behavioral interview questions. And that way you can have a sense roughly like how they're going to ask and what they're going to ask because they'll usually be like the high level stuff like how do you handle conflict, like how do you prioritize, and then prepare by looking at your own experience, your own resume, seeing well at which one of these jobs, or if it's like volunteer or whatever that might be, like where was the time that I had no conflict, how when was the time that I had to prioritize, and then come with 2 or 3 examples per one of those bullets so that you're ready. So I would say like the major behavioral things like how do you handle conflict, how do you handle failure, like how do you handle success, like all those generic stuff, but ultimately out of those generic, so like one line there's like conflict, there's multiple different ways how they ask and why they ask it. But you can get a sense from the job description what they're looking for a lot of times. It also depends on the jobs though as well. Like if you're in food science, it might be I'd say it's more of an innovation type of food science. Like well, they probably will ask me about creativity and like innovations of creating new things. So you can kind of prepare then for that. If it's like finance, FP&A, like how do you do like variance analysis? Do you just go like are you good at finding the root cause and kind of digging deeper? So it's kind of knowing a bit.
Yeah, it sounds like you, again, it comes back to what we were saying earlier with that, like seeing how someone thinks. And it sounds like with the job description for every point, you should be able to speak upon. Maybe you don't have the job experience for it, but it's like, okay, here's how I probably would approach it, just so
Yeah,
then the interviewer can see how your approach would be if you don't have that skill. And then if you do have the skill, this is how I've demonstrated it.
yeah, and I would say even I would say doing I was like, you don't have to necessarily have done it before, but to your point, like you can hypothetically say, oh, if that happens, this is how I would respond. And even if you don't get it correct 100%, at least it shows that you're trying and you're thinking. You're not just like, oh, I don't know. Like you're trying, you're coming with a problem. I mean, not just a problem, but a solution as
Mm-hmm.
well, and trying to figuring it out because that's how you learn is by making mistakes, right? Um,
Yeah.
and that is so important. Like I remember, I think the first time I came into talent acquisition. My boss at the time, she was amazing, and I remember it was my first week um, as a TA specialist, and I think we went for some type of intake meeting, and then these people were listening to what I have to say. I know nothing about TA at the time, and they listened to me as I'm this deep-seated expert. And just remember thinking to myself, like, they think I'm the expert. I know nothing, but they're like eating everything up. And then I remember I told my boss that at the time, and she's like, "Well, Nick, I trust, like I hired you for a reason. I trust your judgment. Go run, like take chances, take risks, fail. I want you to fail because that's how you learn. But if you screw up big enough, just let me know, give me a heads up. But that permission to fail, that really gave me confidence. Like I know I'm not going to be reprimanded for screwing up because that's how you learn.
I think it also points out that key is like communication as well. Like you
Yeah.
can show initiative, but make sure that when you're showing it, you also communicate to others that you're doing it because, it's not because they're trying to catch you or say no to you. It's just like it's like in your own life. You sometimes just like to know if something's going to happen just so you're aware of it and you can kind of prepare.
Yeah.
But it also goes to show like you have a team and we're here to help so we can not catch something way down the line when it becomes like a food issue or something, especially in
Oh,
food.
100%. Oh yeah, I would like definitely loop in the team, and I would say it's twofold. Like one, like I would like even now, like I would loop in my boss, like, yeah, I'm gonna try this so that she's aware of what's about to happen, and she's not getting caught off guard or have the full context. But on the flip side, like I would expect my team to tell me as well, so that if need be, like I can advise, but I try not to go, it's like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Like I want them to try whatever, and then if they're open to it, it's like, okay, well, maybe do it this way, maybe do it that way, because I want them to learn and grow as well. So it's, yeah, communication is really important.
And speaking about trying, because let's just say the resume or the interview you're not hearing back, and I know that I've heard with the job market right now, like some people can apply to lots and lots of jobs, and it can be difficult not to hear back and not sure why. But for those that are kind of struggling right now, and there's a student or a new grad who can't find a job right now, what would be your advice for them to do as they're waiting? How do they stay competitive, and how do they keep momentum even though it might be difficult to find that role?
Well, well, that's a reality for a lot of people, and I'm going to say it's interesting enough when the economy is down and there's not a lot of jobs, universities tend to do really well, because everyone who goes back to
Oh,
school or like you graduate, you can't find a job, so let me rather go do my master's instead. I would say like try and stay close to the industry wherever you're trying to get into. Take contract roles, take adjacent roles, work in distribution centers, quality labs, warehouses, retail. I would say proximity beats perfection. I mean, your first job does not need to be your dream job. You just needed to build some credibility and exposure. And by staying close, you can learn the industry's language, understand how it operates, and then also to build those relationships. I mean, that proximity would really make you more significantly attractive when the right opportunity pops up. Like the example I shared earlier, like when I worked like in the store, I felt like I was drifting further away from what I went to school for. But I leveraged my relationships that I built through networking, and then when the opportunity came, like I guess my experience was highly valued because I understood the environment, I understood the operations, I understood the people, and then already had the I guess the education background to kind of back up the other technical skills of the job. And that said, though, I mean there is always the issue of where industries stick to only hiring from specific industries, like banking, like hire from banking, fintech likes to hire from fintech, CPG hires likes to hire from CPG. I mean, industries have nuances, and having those nuanced experiences really shortens up the ramp up time when you do hire those candidates. But I also believe that a lot of organizations are lazy. They
okay.
hire industry experience only because it's safer. They don't have to take as many risks. Where in fact, I mean, a lot of jobs, the core principles are the same, like recruitment, finance, project management, like all those skills are transferable. I mean, the fundamentals are the same, even though the context might differ. But once again, companies choose the safer route. And that's where networking plays a huge role. And I always say, like, applying to jobs online is like online dating. I mean, you swipe left or right on a profile, you go for that first date, you go for that interview, see if there's chemistry, but ultimately you're one of 200 people. Um, so, and that's really, and if you don't have any experience or don't have the industry experience, they'll rather go with the person that has those. And once again, that's where that networking comes in, because if you have a friend that would suggest, hey, go on a date with this individual, you're most likely going to trust your friend's judgment and go on the date. But I mean, the likelihood that they're going to be some type of axe murderer is really, really low. And the same with networking.
Yeah.
Like this person's resume might not look the greatest, but once you've kind of made that connection and you have another employee vouch for them, I mean, you're mitigating the risk for them. So, I mean, industries have nuance, but skills are transferable. So I'd say like try to stay as close as possible, continue building skills, take certifications, do online learning, volunteer work, network intentionally. And I would say like when looking for a job, like treat it as a job. Like it is exhausting and it can be demoralizing, but like structure your applications, tailor your resumes, have information conversations. And like I said, like your first job does not need to be your dream job. It's about building credibility. Once you have that foundation, it opens, I guess your options expand significantly.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to stop. I think that's a great piece of advice to leave it off. And it goes to show like you never know where your job's going to come from. You can create your path through, starting with a retail job and then working up and then looking for it. It could be networking through a friend. It could be showing up to an event. It could just be applying online. Like there's a lot of different ways to go about finding a job. And I think that this conversation has shown that there's a lot of different ways to get hired, and there's a lot of different things that get shown. What might work for one company won't work, and there's not like a silver bullet for it all.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun. Happy to be here.